Hello, family. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The rain outside did little to wash away the ache in Celine's chest as she stood by the hallway arch, her fingers wrapped tightly around the straps of the box in her arms. Through the open door, she saw them, Joseph and Nora, seated across from each other at the dining table she once polished every Saturday. Nora threw her head back in a laugh so loud it echoed into the hall, as if mocking Celine's last moments in the home she built. Her husband, or perhaps now her ex in everything but paper, reached for Nora's hand across the table, smiling in a way Celine hadn't seen in years. Yet there she stood, barefoot on the cold tiles, watching her replacement live her life before it had even finished ending. She swallowed hard, suppressing the storm within, and tiptoed to the doorway. Not a single word, not a single goodbye. She turned to leave, her eyes lingering one last time on the family photos still hanging in the corridor. Her face was in them, smiling, young, hopeful. Nora hadn't replaced those yet. Maybe she didn't care, or maybe she liked having the reminder. Celine stepped outside into the rain, her black scarf shielding her braided hair as water hit her skin like tiny knives. She didn't run, she walked, slowly. With every step, she whispered to herself, "This is not how it ends. This is just how it begins again." No one followed her. No one begged her to stay. The world she once knew was closing behind her, but she didn't slam the door. She left it open, because even when betrayed, Celine Arins never made a scene. She just learned how to wait. 3 days later, Celine sat in the cramped office of her lawyer, her eyes scanning a document she could barely comprehend. "He filed the business restructuring already?" she asked, her voice low but edged with disbelief. Mr. Okoye nodded solemnly. "Effective immediately. Your name is removed from the official registry of executives." He cited conflict of interest during separation. Celine blinked hard. That business had been her heartbeat. Her hands built it, her savings funded it, and her name once lit up its reception wall. Now she was legally invisible, no board membership, no email access, no employee status, just a ghost of what she once was. Later that evening, her bank app blinked red with a warning. Access revoked by authorized third party. Joseph had frozen the joint accounts, redirecting everything to protect business assets. Celine dropped the phone into her lap and let her hands fall limp. No home, no job, no money. Nora had taken it all, or rather, Joseph had given it all away. She stared at the blank ceiling of her childhood bedroom, a space she never imagined returning to. Her mother knocked gently and peeked in. "You want to talk?" she asked. "No," Celine whispered. "I just want to breathe." And she did. Not as Joseph's wife, not as the company's COO. Just as a woman who had lost her world and hadn't even screamed. Nora walked through the office halls in 6-inch heels like she had been born to rule the space. Employees greeted her with stiff smiles and murmured, "Good morning, Madam Nora," some out of fear, others out of uncertainty. She now sat in the same glass office Celine once called her sanctuary. Except the plants were gone. The family photo on the desk had been replaced with a gold-framed picture of Nora and Joseph at a beachside dinner. She had even ordered Celine's old assistant to shred all physical archives of past project pitches. "Out with the old," she'd said with a smirk. This wasn't a transition, it was a purge, and Nora loved every second of it. That evening, she gave Joseph a tour of her office while clinging to his arm. "I've finally cleaned out all her clutter," she said with a laugh. "I even told HR to wipe the fingerprint scanner. You and I are building a new empire now." Joseph chuckled, but didn't meet her eyes. "Good. Just don't overplay it, Nora." She tilted her head. "Why? Are you feeling guilty?" He looked away. Of course not. But guilt had nothing to do with it. What Joseph feared was that Nora might become more trouble than she was worth. Still, she was part of the new foreign investors' plan, and Celine was the past. What neither of them knew was that the past wasn't done speaking. Celine stood outside the tall glass building she used to walk into with pride, her hand hesitating just before she pushed open the revolving door. Inside, everything looked familiar yet foreign. The receptionist, new, barely looked up. She asked for Abigail. She's in a meeting, came the flat response. You can wait. Celine took a seat by the window, heart pounding. Abigail was not just her friend, she was her sister in spirit, her maid of honor, her partner in every laugh and tear before Nora came into their lives. 30 minutes passed. Then 40. Finally, Abigail stepped into the waiting area in a crisp blazer, eyes widening for a moment when she saw Celine, before the expression was carefully wiped off. Celine, I wasn't expecting you. Her voice was neutral, guarded. Celine stood, her voice soft but steady. I needed to see your face, needed to ask why. Abigail glanced around. Let's not do this here. Where then, Abigail? It's been months, no call, no message. You stood beside me at my wedding and then disappeared into their boardroom like I never existed. Abigail's eyes darted to the receptionist, then back. Things moved quickly. I had no choice. I needed this role. You were gone, and her voice trailed off. Celine blinked back heat behind her eyes. You chose survival, I understand. But don't lie and call it loyalty. Abigail looked away. I'm sorry. No, you're not, Celine replied, walking past her. But one day you will be. When Celine opened the link Logan forwarded her, her throat went dry. It was a video clip, barely a minute long. Nora stood in the center of the office lounge, drink in hand, surrounded by a small circle of executives. Celine? She said, laughing. Oh, sweetheart was always so proper, like she'd float away if she ever raised her voice. That's why she lost. No fire. Someone off camera chuckled. Nora leaned forward theatrically. Joseph said she was like wet toast. Pretty to look at, but no flavor, no backbone. Laughter erupted. The words hit harder than any slap. Celine paused the video. Her breathing came in shallow waves. She sat still in her mother's room, staring at the screen. The comment section was worse, full of strangers analyzing her like a discarded object. Later that evening, Logan called. You okay? He asked gently. It's going viral. Celine's voice was calm. She's trying to bury me in public humiliation. Logan hesitated. She won't succeed. You don't owe the world a response, Celine. I know, she whispered, but I owe myself silence until I have something worth saying. She turned off her phone, sat at her desk, and opened her journal. No rants, just 3 words, let it burn. Then she closed the book. That night, Celine didn't cry. She poured a glass of water, sat by her window, and watched the city lights flicker. Let them laugh, she thought. The storm is still gathering. Celine arrived at the estate gate with a labeled box in her hands. It was a simple request: retrieve her journals and a few keepsakes she left behind in the upstairs study. She rang the bell, expecting the gatekeeper to let her in as he always did. But instead, Nora herself emerged from the side driveway, her heels clicking sharply against the stones. "Can I help you?" she asked with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I came to pick up my things," Celine said quietly, lifting the box. Nora folded her arms. "You should have asked Joseph. This isn't your property anymore. And we've redecorated. There's nothing left with your name on it." Celine's fingers tightened on the box. "You don't have to be cruel," Nora laughed. "Cruel, darling, this is just reality. That house was never yours, just your illusion. You played pretend. I'm living the story now." Celine stood frozen, blinking as the words sank in. The gate didn't open. Nora turned and walked back inside, swaying her hips slightly like a performer finishing a curtain call. Celine looked up at the windows of what used to be her bedroom. Curtains, new ones, blew gently in the wind. Her sanctuary had become a stranger's castle. Slowly, she lowered the box and placed it on the pavement. She wouldn't beg, wouldn't scream. Instead, she opened the lid, pulled out a small ceramic frame, a photo of her and Joseph at their first product launch. She placed it gently on the ground beside the gate, then turned around and walked away, her back straight. Some losses were too sacred to collect. Some wounds needed space, not closure. The scent of roasted beans and soft jazz drifted through the cafe as Celine sat quietly at a corner table, the sleeves of her sweater pulled over her hands like a shield. She glanced at the doorway each time it opened until Logan walked in, taller than she remembered, wearing a navy turtleneck and a coat dusted with rain. He spotted her and smiled, a kind of smile that didn't rush her grief but respected it. "You haven't changed much," he said, pulling out the chair opposite hers. "I've changed more than I let on," she replied, managing a small smile. They exchanged quiet pleasantries until the conversation settled into something warmer, gentler. Logan had once interned at her company, fresh out of university, and she had been the only one who gave him more than just errands. "You were the only one who ever asked me what I actually wanted to do," he said, eyes softening. "That stuck with me." Celine looked down at her cup, stirring foam she didn't plan to drink. "I thought I was building something solid," she said. "Turns out, the ground underneath me was already crumbling." Logan leaned in slightly. "Sometimes the collapse reveals the blueprint beneath." She raised a brow. "That's very poetic for a logistics guy." He laughed. "Well, logistics is about rebuilding, too." He then leaned back and crossed his arms. "Listen, I've got a small operation now. It's nothing glamorous, but it's honest. We're expanding next quarter. If you ever want to get your hands dirty again, not as a boss, just as you, I'd be honored." Celine stared at him, startled. No one had spoken to her like that in months. No agenda, no pity, just an open door. She didn't answer immediately, but something in her chest softened. "I'll think about it," she said, voice low. He nodded. "Good, no pressure. Just know there's someone who hasn't forgotten who you are." For the first time in a long while, Celine didn't feel like a shadow. She felt seen. Newspaper landed on the table with a dull thud, the headline bold and celebratory. "Joseph and Nora, the power couple rebrands EJP Global." Celine's heart stuttered as she read the article line by line. The company she had named, nurtured, and built from its earliest days was now being refashioned as if she never existed. The feature went on to praise Nora's bold marketing instincts and Joseph's strategic brilliance, tracing their timeline from courtship to corporate domination. But there wasn't a single mention of the original co-founder, no Celine, no backstory, no acknowledgement. It was like watching herself erased in real time, like a statue being sanded down until only smooth stone remained. She closed the paper gently, her fingers trembling not with rage, but with a deeper ache of invisibility. Her mother noticed the shift. "You okay, baby?" she asked, sitting beside her with a warm plate of rice and peppered stew. Celine didn't answer immediately. Then she whispered, "They've rewritten the story. I don't even exist in it anymore." Her mother took a long breath. "Let them write what they want. You still have the truth." Celine gave a broken smile. "And what does the truth buy these days?" Her mother looked her in the eyes. "Dignity, memory, and sometimes power." That last word sat on Celine's mind longer than it should have. Later that night, she stared at the shelf of old files she had boxed after her resignation. Something inside her itched, not for revenge, but for restoration. Not to be glorified, but simply to reclaim what was hers. She didn't want to be worshipped. She just didn't want to be forgotten. The rain had returned the next morning, tapping against the windows with steady persistence. Celine sat cross-legged on the floor of her old room, pulling out one dusty box after another. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but her fingers moved instinctively. Then she found it, a slim black folder wedged behind a stack of design journals. She opened it slowly. Inside was a stamped original shareholding certificate issued years ago, back when the company was first registered. It was in her maiden name, Celine Arins. Her eyes froze on the line that read, "Shareholder, 51% ownership." Her breath caught. Her hand covered her mouth as she reread it over and over. Joseph had never updated the company's structure after their marriage. Everything Nora was enjoying, everything Joseph was claiming, it still legally belonged to her. She rose to her feet slowly, the folder trembling in her grip. Her mother entered the room, holding a mug of tea. "I made you." She paused when she saw the look on Celine's face. "Mama," Celine whispered, eyes wide, "I never gave up my rights. I just forgot I had them." Her mother sat down carefully. "You mean?" Celine nodded. "I still own more than half of the company, under my maiden name. Joseph never consolidated the shares." Her mother exhaled deeply, almost as if she had been holding that breath for years. "Then, baby, you're not lost. You're just quiet. And there's a difference." Celine sat back down, pressing the folder to her chest. For the first time since everything crumbled, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a page waiting to be turned. And this time, she would write it in her own ink. The sharp scent of old ink and the textured feel of yellowing documents transported Celine back to the very beginning. Her room faded as memory pulled her into an office with peeling paint and flickering bulbs, her and Joseph's first rented space. She remembered that cramped corner with a borrowed desk, a second-hand laptop, and dreams that felt too big for their tiny budget. Back then, Joseph used to call her Vision, always saying she could see things before they existed. "Let's not just start a company," she had told him once. "Let's build a legacy." And so they did. It was her idea to structure the initial shares under their separate names, just in case something happened. "You never know the future," she had told him. And Joseph had laughed. "Then we'll make the future owe us." Neither of them foresaw betrayal, only ambition. Tears blurred her vision as she stared at one particular page, a photo of their first launch. Joseph standing beside her with a nervous smile, while she held their certificate like a trophy. He used to believe in her. He used to look at her like she was the entire plan, not just part of it. But something changed after the company's third year, when investors came in, when awards started landing, and when Nora became her assistant. That was when Joseph began growing distant, calling her too cautious, while Nora whispered bold, risky strategies into his ears like poison dressed in perfume. She never thought he'd sacrifice their foundation for fleeting power. And now, with the certificate in her hands, Celine realized that while they may have robbed her of recognition, they never erased the roots. "They played the surface," she murmured aloud, "but I built the soil." She folded the papers gently, not with panic, but with resolve. The past wasn't her weakness, it was her weapon. Celine sat alone in the back of a small bookstore, her fingers tracing the edge of a novel she wasn't reading. On the mounted television near the checkout counter, a flashy headline flashed across the screen. CEO Joseph Adetayo marries longtime partner Nora Ekin in private estate ceremony. The image of them smiling beneath a cascade of white roses and gold drapery filled the screen. Nora wore a diamond-encrusted gown, and Joseph's hand rested possessively on her waist. The quote at the bottom read, "We're ready to build something unstoppable." Celine blinked slowly, taking in the spectacle. The same man who once whispered his vows into her ears was now posing as if love was a business merger. The bookstore's attendant glanced her way, recognized her from past articles, and quickly looked away. It was humiliating, yet somehow numbing. Later that evening, Celine's mother found her folding laundry with mechanical precision. "You heard?" she asked softly. Celine nodded. They wanted the world to see, to believe it's a love story. Her mother sat beside her and said, "He thinks he's marrying into control." Celine looked down. "It's not the wedding that hurts. It's the rewriting, as if we never mattered." Her mother took her hand. "You mattered. You still do. And you still hold more than they realize." Celine forced a thin smile. "He thinks marrying her sealed the deal." She paused. "But you can only seal what's yours to begin with." That night, Celine stayed up rereading her shareholder documents. The wedding wasn't an ending, it was a countdown. While they toasted to their illusion, she was quietly reclaiming her foundation. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The following week, Celine wrapped her box of documents in brown paper and took a slow walk through downtown, her scarf tied tight against the wind. She walked past the old coffee house where she and Joseph used to brainstorm, past the plaza where their first banner once hung. Each place was like a bruise that no longer hurt, but still throbbed when touched. She arrived at a small co-working space and walked inside. It was here she had quietly arranged to meet 3 old clients who once respected her work. They greeted her with warmth that surprised her. "Celine Arins," one of them said, eyes widening. "I didn't know you were still in the game." She smiled. "I never left the game. I just let others play their round." She laid out her documents on the small table, explained the shares, and asked for discretion. "I'm not here to fight publicly," she said. "I just want to make sure the next phase doesn't exclude me." One of the older men, Mr. Bakare, leaned forward. "You built that company. We know. People talk. People remember. Just because the lights shifted doesn't mean the structure changed." Another woman, Mrs. Durawai, reached out. "When you're ready, Celine, I'll back your next proposal. Whatever it is." Celine nodded slowly, her heart swelling not with pride, but with quiet power. She left the space with her scarf fluttering behind her and a renewed sense of direction. She didn't need headlines. She just needed precision. While Joseph and Nora chased applause, she was weaving a comeback so silent it wouldn't echo, it would land. Celine was reviewing shipment flowcharts for one of Logan's new distribution hubs when he walked into the cafe, his face drawn with tension. She closed the binder and looked up. "You look like someone saw a ghost," she said half-jokingly. Logan sat across from her, running a hand over his shaved head. "You're not going to like what I'm about to say." Celine leaned in, her brow furrowing. "Go on," he sighed, then spoke in a low voice. "I was invited to a private business mixer last night. Joseph was there. He's finalizing a partnership with a French tech conglomerate. The deal is massive, worth millions. But here's the kicker. It requires board approval and full shareholder consent before it can proceed." He met her eyes, which means, "They'll need your signature, Celine." She blinked, her thoughts racing. "They think I don't know. They think I've gone quiet for good." Logan nodded. "They believe you vanished, but you're still the 51%. Celine exhaled slowly. "So that's why he married her," she murmured. "To impress the investors. A perfect couple facade for the international market." Logan looked pained. "They've built their empire on image, not substance. And they've bet everything on this deal going through." Celine leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Then it's time to remind them that legacy isn't built on illusions." Logan's voice was steady. "You have the power to either sign and let them rise, or end it in one pen stroke." Celine nodded, but her voice was gentle. "And that's why I won't rush. Let them believe they've won. Until the very last page." The boardroom shimmered with new glass fixtures and custom artwork, as Nora paced before the staff in heels that clicked like applause. "In the next quarter, we'll be launching our international expansion. Joseph and I have already started the first phase with the French firm," she announced with a wide smile. Her tone held a touch of arrogance, the kind that comes not from leadership, but from performance. Behind her, Joseph offered a polite nod as she spoke, but his eyes were wary. Nora's confidence had ballooned in recent weeks. She had started referring to herself in third person, Madam CEO, even in internal memos. At one point, she had told the accounting head, "We're not running a business anymore. We're shaping a global destiny." When someone mentioned needing the board's full vote for the expansion, Nora waved it off. "Oh, please," she laughed. "It's a formality. Everyone who matters is already on board. The shareholders don't even know what the new vision is, and frankly, they don't need to." Joseph's face tensed slightly. "Let's not be dismissive, Nora," he murmured under his breath. "The documents still need a majority sign-off." She scoffed, brushing a manicured hand through her sleek bob. "You worry too much. No one's seen or heard from Celine in months. She's gone. She won't even know this is happening until we've already crossed the finish line." Joseph looked away, troubled. The truth gnawed at him. In their race to erase Celine, they had forgotten something dangerous. Her silence had always been louder than most people's rage. Celine hadn't planned on stopping by the old financial district, but something drew her there that Friday afternoon. She walked through the building where her journey began, where she used to sit with her mentors and pitch ideas long before she ever became a name. There, in a quiet private lounge just off the corridor, she ran into Mr. Eckenham. He was one of the original board members, a dignified man with white-streaked hair and eyes that saw past power plays. He blinked, surprised to see her. "Celine Arins," he said with a warm smile. Still standing tall, she bowed slightly, humbled, trying to remember what tall even feels like. They sat, and over a glass of lemon tea, he leaned forward and said, "Word travels. They think you're out of the picture." She said nothing, just stared at her cup. Mr. Eckenham's voice grew gentler. "You were always the heart of that company. Joseph had the charm. Nora had the ambition, but you were the one who made it all human." Celine blinked back the sting in her eyes. "Then why didn't anyone stop them?" He sighed. "Sometimes the world follows noise. But I've watched your silence, and I know you're not finished." He slid a small envelope across the table. "Board meeting notice. They're scheduling the vote next month. If you still hold what I think you do, your presence will change everything." She picked up the envelope slowly. "I never thought I'd be back here. Not like this. Mr. Eckenham stood, buttoning his coat. Come back not to fight, but to remind them who you were before they rewrote your name. And with that, he left her in the stillness of a war that was no longer hers to start, but hers to finish. The gala was held at the Horizon Skyline Hotel, a towering venue glittering with glass chandeliers and velvet curtains that dripped elegance. It was more than a product launch, it was a performance. Joseph and Nora arrived hand in hand, dressed in coordinated designer outfits, radiating confidence and affluence. The hall buzzed with cameras, journalists, foreign investors, and curious onlookers eager to witness the new era of the company. Behind the podium, Joseph gave a calculated speech laced with promises of disruption and global dominance. We are ready to take our brand beyond borders, he declared, while Nora nodded beside him with a poised smile. To many, they looked like the golden pair of modern entrepreneurship. But what the crowd didn't know was that this empire had shaky legs, and none of it could truly stand without one missing signature. Nora took the microphone next, her voice smooth and commanding. The future belongs to risk-takers, she said. We're not afraid to leave the past behind and forge ahead. Her tone carried an undertone of triumph, as if she were claiming victory over an invisible enemy. The foreign delegates applauded, clearly impressed. What none of them realized, however, was that buried beneath all the press releases, glossy presentations, and tailored sound bites, there existed a shareholder whose presence would either crown or crush the dream. Backstage, Logan, invited discreetly as a vendor, watched it all unfold from a corner. He didn't approach Celine afterward. He didn't need to. They had already agreed. Let the applause rise. Let the champagne flow. Let them believe the gates were open. Because sometimes the most powerful entrance is the one no one expects until it's too late. 3 days after the gala, a thick white envelope arrived at Celine's doorstep, bearing the company's embossed crest in gold. She opened it slowly, the weight of it unfamiliar yet expected. Inside was a formal board meeting invitation, complete with her shareholder ID, agenda details, and a section highlighted for her necessary approval on the pending international partnership. Celine stared at the bolded line, majority shareholder, Selena Rins. Her thumb paused on the lettering as a strange mix of vindication and sadness pulsed through her. After months of being erased, here was her name, undeniable, unmissable, necessary. They didn't want her back. They just needed her hand. She let out a breath that sounded like both a laugh and a sigh. For the first time in months, the table couldn't turn without her chair being pulled out. She called Logan as she walked the length of her backyard barefoot, the document clutched loosely in one hand. It came, she said softly. They've officially asked for my consent. Logan chuckled on the other end. Let me guess, they think you'll rubber stamp it without blinking. Celine smiled faintly. They don't know who they're dealing with anymore. There was silence, then Logan asked, So what's the move? She stopped walking and looked up at the sky. I'll go. I'll wear calm like perfume. And I'll carry memory like a sword. He exhaled in admiration. They have no idea what's coming. She tucked the invitation back into the envelope. That's the point, Logan. That's exactly the point. The conference room was dimly lit when Nora received the email forwarded from legal. At first, she skimmed it, barely blinking. Then she saw it, Celine's full name listed as the 51% shareholder, along with confirmation of her RSVP to the upcoming board vote. Nora froze. Her breath hitched. Her hands gripped the edge of the marble table as the realization slammed into her like a tidal wave. Celine never lost ownership. Panic surged through her chest. Joseph, she yelled, storming out of the room and into his office without knocking. You said she was out. You said she was finished. Joseph, already sitting with his laptop, looked up in irritation. Lower your voice. Don't you dare tell me to calm down, she snapped. You married me for this deal. You promised she couldn't come back. Joseph stood and shut the door, his expression grim. I didn't know, Nora. I thought she transferred her shares when we got married. I thought the paperwork was done. Nora was trembling now. You didn't verify? You built everything, this deal, this company, on a guess? Her voice cracked. I gave up everything to be beside you. I burned bridges. I destroyed her. And she's still holding the crown. Joseph rubbed his face. We underestimated her. No, Nora hissed. You underestimated her. I just followed your lead. She began pacing the room like a caged animal. If she says no, we lose the partnership. The investors pull out. Everything collapses. Joseph nodded slowly. Then we need to convince her, or control her. Nora's eyes narrowed. I'm not asking. If we fall, she's falling with us. But deep down, even as she spoke those words, a dread took root in her chest. Because now, for the first time, Nora realized she was standing on borrowed ground, and the real owner had just knocked. Joseph stared at the ceiling of his dimly lit study, the room suffocating despite the open window. His silence mocked him. His empire, carefully built on charm and reinvention, was now threatened by the one person he had convinced himself was irrelevant. The glowing screen of his phone showed 12 unanswered calls and 3 unopened messages, all sent to Celine. He tried calling again, pacing in circles, the phone pressed against his ear. Celine, please. His voice cracked into the voicemail. We need to talk. Can we meet? He tried texting next. Let's settle this in peace. Don't do anything drastic. He didn't realize how pitiful he sounded until he caught his reflection in the glass. The man who once had control now stood like a beggar, clutching his last chance to save everything. At 11:47 p.m., an email notification lit up his phone. It was from her, short, precise, brutal. You will have my answer at the board meeting. Direct all communication through legal. No greeting, no emotion, just the promise of presence. Joseph sank into his chair, wiping sweat from his brow. He remembered the early days when Celine would sit beside him, calm and logical, always 2 steps ahead. She never raised her voice, never acted out of impulse, and that terrified him now. Nora stormed in, wild-eyed. As she replied, he handed her the phone. She read the message and slammed it on the desk. She's playing God. Joseph swallowed hard. No, he whispered. She's just remembering who she was before we made her forget. They both sat in silence, the weight of consequence pressing on their shoulders. The one woman they dismissed was about to make the decision neither of them could control. The boardroom was brighter than usual, the windows drawn wide open as if to welcome the breeze of fate. Members filed in, murmuring softly, eyes darting with curiosity. They had all heard whispers that the forgotten co-founder had returned, not as a footnote, but as a force. The room went quiet when the door opened, and Celine entered. She wore a charcoal gray suit tailored with quiet confidence, her hair swept into a low bun, her stride graceful. She said nothing as she walked to her original seat, one she hadn't occupied in years. Nora's eyes widened slightly as if seeing a ghost. Joseph's lips parted, but no words came out. Celine opened her folder, placed a silver pen on the table, and waited. The meeting commenced. Let's proceed, said the board secretary. First item on the agenda, final approval for the international expansion. Majority shareholder signature required. All heads turned to Celine. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she flipped through the proposal with deliberate slowness. The room held its breath. Then she spoke, clear, composed. I see projections based on inflated assumptions. No risk buffer, no local strategy. This isn't expansion, this is a gamble. Nora shifted in her seat. This plan was approved by all departments. Celine cut her off. All departments you selected, Nora. Then she turned to Joseph. You always said you wanted to build something unstoppable. But what you built is unstable. The chairman cleared his throat. Ms. Arins, do you approve the deal? She reached for her pen. I'll give my answer now. The air grew still. Then, with a single motion, she signed, not the approval line, but the dissolution clause. The contract was dead. Joseph's shoulders slumped. Nora went pale. The table was still. Until one board member whispered, well, that was decisive. The pen clicked shut with a soft snap, but the echo it left behind felt thunderous. Celine pushed the signed document forward, then leaned back, her expression unreadable. Nora was the first to react, lurching forward, voice shaking. You've just destroyed everything. Her tone bordered on hysteria. Do you even understand what you've done? Celine met her gaze with chilling calm. You built a throne on a fault line. I didn't destroy it, Nora. I just stopped pretending it was stable. Joseph tried to salvage what he could. Celine, we can negotiate. Let's find a way to revise the deal. She tilted her head. You didn't invite me to revise anything. You invited me to validate your illusion, and I don't lend my name to lies. Every word cut deeper than raised voices ever could. The room watched in awe. This wasn't vengeance. This was justice delivered in silk gloves. The chairman cleared his throat awkwardly. With the majority shareholder refusing approval, the expansion is legally halted. Furthermore, he added, glancing at a document, Clause 9.3 states any attempt to bypass shareholder authority leads to an immediate reassessment of executive privileges. Nora stiffened. What does that mean? The legal advisor stepped forward. It means both you and Mr. Adebayo are temporarily suspended pending investigation into procedural misconduct. The silence that followed was suffocating. Nora looked as if the floor had been pulled from under her. Joseph, on the other hand, simply closed his eyes. Celine stood, collecting her folder and pen. You both fought for control, she said softly, but forgot the law never left my hands. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving behind a silence so sharp it hummed. It was the sharp click of polished shoes on marble that broke the silence first. Two members of the corporate security team entered the boardroom with quiet authority, their presence drawing gasps and uncertain glances from the board. Nora instinctively rose, her voice high and brittle. What is this? The head of legal stood as well, adjusting his glasses. Following Clause 9.3 of our governance agreement, and after a unanimous board vote based on Ms. Arinz's signed objection, executive privileges are suspended pending internal audit. Joseph didn't move. He simply stared at the table in front of him, his knuckles white where they gripped the edge. Nora, however, began to unravel. You can't do this. We built this company. Her voice trembled between rage and desperation as the guards stepped forward. One of them gently extended a hand toward her. Ma'am, please. Nora yanked her arm away, then turned to Joseph. Say something. Stop them. Joseph finally stood, but not to defend her. He looked at her for a long, cold moment. We lost the moment we forgot who helped us build it. Nora's lips parted in disbelief. You're siding with her. He shook his head. No, I'm facing the consequences. The guards escorted them out slowly. Nora shouted behind her, You haven't won, Celine. This isn't the end. But Celine was no longer listening. She remained seated, calm as stone. Only when the doors closed behind them did she finally rise. The chairman turned to her with quiet respect. Would you like to address the board? Celine nodded. Her voice was soft but steady. We can't undo the damage, but we can rebuild with integrity. And in that moment, the woman who had once been dismissed as a memory reclaimed the room, not as a victim, but as its future. 3 days after the boardroom spectacle, Celine received an unexpected knock at her front door. When she opened it, she was met by a familiar face, Abigail. She looked different now. No longer the polished PR executive in expensive heels and blazers. She wore simple jeans, a blouse creased at the edges, and guilt written all over her face. Can I come in? She asked softly. Celine stepped aside without a word. They sat in the living room, the air tense, but not hostile. Abigail fiddled with the hem of her sleeve before finally saying, I owe you more than an apology. Celine met her eyes. Then speak it plainly. Abigail's voice cracked. I turned my back on you. When Nora offered me her trust, I took it. When Joseph stripped you of your title, I didn't say a word. I was afraid of losing everything. But now I realize I already lost the most important thing. Your trust. Celine listened in silence, letting every word settle before responding. I was never angry about your silence, Abigail. I was disappointed by your convenience. Abigail lowered her gaze, shame washing over her. They fired me the day after the meeting. No warning, just a dismissal letter in my inbox. All the loyalty I gave meant nothing. Celine tilted her head. That's how betrayal feels. When you realize the person you protected never planned to protect you back. Tears welled in Abigail's eyes. Do you hate me? Celine sighed. No, but I won't pretend like nothing happened either. A pause. Then she added, Redemption isn't about being perfect. It's about staying when it's uncomfortable. Abigail nodded, grateful. I'm here now. Even if it's just to carry chairs and type memos, I want to rebuild what I let break. Celine stood slowly and extended her hand. Then start by earning it. Not through words, but through time. In that quiet moment, something began to mend, not completely, but enough for hope to slip in. Celine entered the building through the front entrance, not through a side door or freight elevator like before. Her return was deliberate, not dramatic. Staff paused mid-conversation, mid-email, mid-step as she walked past. Some stood awkwardly, not knowing whether to nod, greet her, or apologize. She didn't expect fanfare, and she didn't demand it. What she wanted was far more valuable: accountability. When she arrived at the top floor, her key card, still valid, surprisingly, opened the executive wing. Her heels echoed down the hallway, each step erasing the memory of the one who had tried to erase her. The plaque on the door still reads CEO Joseph Adetayo. She paused, reached into her bag, and unwrapped a small nameplate that had been tucked away for years. CEO Celine Arins. She replaced the plaque in silence. Inside, the office had been stripped of warmth. No photos, no personal touches. Just cold glass and chrome. She moved slowly around the room, placing one item at a time: a framed photo of her father by the window, a sculpture gifted to her by an old mentor, a worn journal filled with ink-stained dreams. Then she stood behind the desk and rested her palms on the smooth wood. This was not about revenge. This was about restoration. A soft knock broke her thoughts. It was the receptionist, new and young. "Ma'am, just wanted to say, welcome back." Celine smiled gently. "Thank you." The girl hesitated, then added, "We've heard stories about you, the kind that make people want to stay and work harder." Celine's eyes softened. "Then let's write some new stories together." As the door closed behind the girl, Celine sat down, not as someone filling a position, but as someone reclaiming a vision. The seat fit differently now. Not because she had changed it, but because she had changed. The studio lights were bright and unrelenting, exposing every flicker of discomfort on Nora's face as she sat stiffly in the guest chair across from the morning show host. The set was dressed in gold and white, but nothing about the atmosphere felt warm. "Today we're joined by Nora Ikin Adetayo," the host began, tone neutral but curious, to talk about recent transitions in EJP Global and her sudden removal from executive leadership. Nora adjusted her blouse and forced a smile. "I'm here to clarify the misconceptions," she said. "What happened at the board meeting was not a reflection of my competence. It was political." She went on to speak of bias, of loyalty unreciprocated, and of how certain people had made it their mission to dismantle everything she had helped grow. Her words were laced with victimhood, and though her eyes occasionally shimmered with tears, her voice remained steady, too steady. But as the interview progressed, the screen behind her unexpectedly shifted. Archived footage played from her earlier days in the company, unedited and raw. A clip of her scoffing at staff, dismissing reports, and making sarcastic remarks about the old leadership style flickered onto the monitor. The audience gasped. The host raised an eyebrow. These were taken from internal surveillance and submitted anonymously. "Do you deny these moments?" Nora's mouth parted, speechless. "That footage was taken out of context," she muttered. But the damage was already done. Social media exploded within minutes, the hashtags entitled CEO and Arins was right trending by noon. Online commentators didn't just discuss her dismissal, they dissected her downfall. What had been intended as an image-cleansing campaign had turned into a mirror she could no longer hide from. By the time she left the studio, Nora wasn't just out of power, she was out of public grace. Celine found the envelope waiting for her on her desk the following Monday morning, plain, handwritten, and unsealed. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a letter written in Joseph's familiar, slanted script. "I don't know if I deserve to be heard," it began, "but I needed to speak anyway." He spoke not from the position of a businessman, but as a man stripped of pretense. He recounted the early days, how he had once admired her discipline, envied her foresight, and leaned on her brilliance. Then came the part she hadn't expected. "When the investors wanted someone louder, flashier, I panicked. I thought charm could replace stability. I let greed whisper that love was too quiet to sustain power." Line by line, he dismantled the version of himself she once tried to hold on to. "I married Nora because I thought it would buy time and favor. But in doing so, I sold out the woman who had already given me everything." Celine sat motionless, the letter trembling slightly in her fingers. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't plead for a second chance. Instead, he acknowledged his shame. You never needed to scream to be powerful. I see that now. I only hope the world sees it too. At the bottom of the page, he had written one final sentence. This is not a request for reconciliation, it's a confession. She folded the letter slowly, placing it in a drawer with other things that mattered once. When Abigail walked in and asked, "You okay?" Celine gave a faint nod. He finally found the courage to tell the truth. Abigail looked uncertain. "And what will you do with it?" Celine looked out the window. "Nothing. Sometimes the truth isn't meant to fix anything. It's just meant to exist, so it doesn't rot inside the one who carries it." It was after a strategy roundtable when Logan lingered in the hallway, waiting for the others to leave. The office had regained its rhythm under Celine's direction, but Logan noticed she carried the weight differently now, shoulders squared not with tension, but with earned authority. "You've made this place feel alive again," he said, leaning against the wall. Celine smiled, tired but content. "Not alive, just honest." He nodded, "Which is why I came to you first." He handed her a folder, details of a logistics initiative aimed at streamlining supply chains across 3 states. "It's bold," she said, flipping through the pages. "It's risky," Logan shrugged. "So was standing back up after everything they took from you. But you did that, and more." She closed the folder slowly. "Why me?" "Because you don't just build systems, Celine. You build people," he replied. "You gave me a chance when I was a clueless intern. Now I'm offering a partnership. Equal footing, mutual vision." She studied his face, searching for traces of ambition cloaked in flattery, but found none. Just sincerity. "What would it require?" she asked. "Time, trust, and your gut instinct, which has never been wrong." She walked to the window and looked out over the city. "You're not offering me a position," she murmured. "You're inviting me to dream again." He smiled softly. "Exactly." After a long pause, she turned back. "Let's do it, but on one condition." "Anything," Logan said. She held up the folder. "This time I'm not coming in quietly. The world will know this is mine from day one." Logan's grin widened. "Then let's make some noise." The estate gates creaked open slowly as the guards, new ones, now under her instruction, stood at attention. Celine didn't arrive in anger or with a court order. She came with finality and quiet ownership. The mansion that once held her laughter, her tears, her visions of forever now stood under gray skies, its walls scrubbed of memories, but never of origin. The house had been acquired under her investment shell years ago, an asset Joseph forgot was never jointly reassigned. With the right documents filed, all that was left was re-entry. She stepped out of the car, dressed not in armor but in grace. Her heels sank slightly into the earth as she walked toward the front porch, where new staff stood unsure of how to greet her. She spoke gently. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't know, but now you do." Inside, the decor was different, flashier, colder. Gold-framed mirrors, white marble vases, furniture that screamed status but not soul. Nora had tried to erase her touch with lavish chaos. Celine walked room to room, slowly opening the windows, letting air return, letting time breathe. In the master bedroom, she found one thing untouched, a storage box beneath the wardrobe, dusty, but labeled in her handwriting, "Family Plans, Phase 2." She opened it. Inside were sketches of a nursery, budgets for expansion, and notes in her own hand of things she'd wanted to build, a family home, not just a house. Her fingers hovered over a faded Polaroid of her and Joseph, laughing over paint samples, a moment frozen in a timeline that no longer belonged to her. She didn't cry. Instead, she placed the box on a shelf, not to mourn, but to remember. When the manager approached with a clipboard, unsure, she simply said, "Change the locks, and send the old furniture to storage. This place is coming back to life, not the way it was, but the way it was meant to be." The room was smaller than her corporate boardroom, but it felt grander. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in golden morning light as Celine sat at a large oak desk, this one hers by design, not inheritance. The partnership with Logan had flourished faster than anyone expected, but today was more than a milestone. It was personal. A new international logistics corridor was being finalized, and at the center of the contract was her name, not in footnotes, not in disclaimers, but bold and permanent. Founder, Celine Arins. She opened the folder, reviewed the clauses, and with a calm breath, picked up her pen. Her staff watched through the glass with pride, some filming, others simply beaming. As the final signature pressed onto the page, she whispered to herself, "This isn't about revenge. This is remembrance." A quiet reclaiming of everything they thought she lost, but that had always, silently, remained hers. The applause was respectful, not explosive. She preferred it that way. Logan entered and raised his glass. To beginnings that don't apologize for surviving. She smiled, raising hers in return. To voices that no longer ask for permission. The celebration continued around her, but Celine stepped aside, standing by the window, her fingers brushing the edge of the contract. Her reflection in the glass no longer looked like someone who had been broken. It looked like someone who had rebuilt deliberately. The skyline before her wasn't a finish line. It was a reminder of all the bridges she had burned, rebuilt, and crossed. The story wasn't about a woman who lost everything. It was about a woman who remembered she never needed to beg for what she already owned. She had waited. She had endured. And in the end, it wasn't rage that restored her. It was the signature she saved for last. Here's the Bible verse. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Explanation. This verse captures the essence of Celine's journey. Though her world was torn apart, and though she was silenced, forgotten, and betrayed, in the fullness of time, what was hers was restored beautifully, purposefully, and without force. God's timing brought redemption that no human manipulation could erase. Moral of the story. True power is not loud, it is patient, principled, and precise. Celine's story reminds us that strength doesn't always come from immediate retaliation or loud resistance. Sometimes it lies in silent endurance, in remembering one's worth even when others try to erase it. When you plant your legacy in truth, not even betrayal, injustice, or delay can take it away. And when the time comes, it only takes one calm decision, one signature, to rewrite the ending on your own terms. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.